The day at Jujutsu High was coming to a close. The kind of quiet spring evening that makes the whole world feel like it's breathing in slow motion. The air carried that unmistakable scent of rain, long past. Clean, cool, faintly sweet from the grass and petals that covered the courtyard like a soft carpet of pink. High on the hill, the last sunlight was beginning to melt into gold. Its glow poured over the rooftops, through the wooden beams and across the weathered stones of the courtyard, where the students had begun to gather after a long day of training. Even the crows that usually perched on the old Torii gate had gone silent, as if nature itself had paused to listen. The wind was light, the kind that plays with the edges of sleeves and whispers across the water. The cherry blossoms had been in bloom for days, and tonight they would fall like slow snow, each one carrying a memory of the day behind it. Under the largest cherry tree, Panda had already claimed his favorite spot. He lay on his back, enormous paws folded behind his head, eyes half closed as the petals landed lazily on his fur. Each time one landed on his nose, he puffed it away with a sleepy snort that made Nobara Kugisaki laugh. A few feet away, Inumaki leaned against the same tree, knees pulled to his chest. He held a paper cup of tea in both hands, steam curling in the fading light. Every now and then, he would murmur one of his usual phrases, "Salmon," "tuna mayo," and Panda would respond with a quiet chuckle. The atmosphere was calm, unhurried, like the first few minutes of a dream. From across the courtyard, Maki Zenin sat sharpening her weapon. The slow, deliberate rhythm of stone against steel created a steady heartbeat for the evening. It wasn't harsh, more like a lullaby made of purpose. Each pass of the whetstone gleamed in the golden light. Maki's movements were smooth, certain, almost meditative. And then came Yuji Itadori. He pushed open the sliding door to the main hall with his usual cheerful energy, the sound of his voice spilling into the stillness like sunlight breaking through a cloud. "Whoa, you guys already started the party without me?" he said, balancing a tray of steaming onigiri and small cups of tea. Nobara rolled her eyes, though her smile betrayed her affection. "It's not a party, Itadori. It's a peaceful evening. You should try having one sometime." Yuji grinned and set the tray down on the low wooden table near the center of the courtyard. "Peaceful evening, huh? Guess that means no curses, no Gojo showing off, and no Megumi scolding me for being too loud." Right on cue, Megumi Fushiguro appeared behind him, hands in his pockets, gaze calm but slightly exasperated. "Too late," he said dryly. "You're already loud." Yuji laughed. "Come on, Fushiguro. Even you can admit it's too nice a night to brood." Megumi gave a small shrug, but there was the faintest upward curve at the corner of his mouth, his version of a smile. "I'm not brooding. I'm appreciating." Nobara tilted her head, pretending to think. Brooding appreciation, then? Even in their teasing, there was comfort. These small moments, these little sparks of friendship, were what made Jujutsu High more than a school for exorcists. It was a home. A fragile, fleeting one, perhaps, but home nonetheless. They settled around the table, unwrapping rice balls, sipping tea, and watching as the sky turned to lavender. The lanterns hanging under the eaves flickered to life one by one, casting circles of soft amber light across the courtyard. Farther off, two figures stood near the edge of the grounds, Gojo Satoru and Nanami Kento. Gojo had his usual relaxed posture, hands tucked in his pockets, blindfold glimmering faintly in the dusk. "You know," he said, voice light, "I think this might actually be the most cursed-free night we've had all month." Nanami adjusted his glasses. "That's a dangerous thing to say out loud, Gojo." Gojo laughed. "Superstition? Me? Nah. Besides, I've got you here as my good luck charm." Nanami sighed, but there was no annoyance in it, only quiet patience. "If I'm your good luck charm, we're doomed." The two men turned toward the students, who were now sharing jokes and bits of food. Gojo's tone softened slightly. "They're coming along nicely, aren't they?" Nanami nodded. "They have heart. It'll carry them farther than technique ever will." For a moment, the only sounds were the wind in the branches and the faint laughter drifting from the courtyard. Then Gojo stretched, long and cat-like, and said, "Well, I suppose someone has to keep the fire going. I'll go gather some wood." Nanami looked at him sideways. "You mean we will go gather some wood? Because if you go alone, you'll get distracted, and we'll end up with a bonfire in the faculty office." Gojo grinned under his blindfold. "You wound me, Nanami. But fine, come along. We'll make it a team-building exercise." As they turned away toward the small wooded path behind the school, their voices faded into the hum of the evening. The students hardly noticed they were gone. They were too busy enjoying the rare sense of normalcy that hung over them like a blanket. The fire pit in the center crackled softly. Yuji poked at it with a stick, watching the embers glow. "You ever think about how weird it is that we can actually relax here? After everything?" Megumi looked up from his tea. "It's not weird. It's necessary." Nobara leaned back on her hands. "Well, if peace is necessary, I could get used to it." Panda rolled over, sending a puff of petals into the air. "Same. Peace and snacks. Maybe a nap." Yuji threw a petal at him. "You've been napping all day." Panda grinned, eyes half open. "And look how happy I am." The light dimmed, shadows stretching long across the stones. Above them, the cherry trees whispered secrets only they could understand. Every breeze carried the perfume of the blossoms, soft, sweet, and fleeting. It was the scent of things that don't last, and perhaps that's what made it beautiful. As the evening deepened, the conversation softened into comfortable silence. Yuji leaned back against the tree trunk, eyes half closed, content. Nobara began humming an old tune, something that might have been a lullaby once, long ago. Megumi rested his elbows on his knees, gaze fixed on the petals, swirling slowly down. The moon had begun its climb now, pale silver through the branches. Somewhere in the distance, Gojo's laugh echoed faintly, followed by Nanami's patient sigh. The sound drifted like a memory through the courtyard, then faded away. In that moment, under the falling blossoms, the students of Jujutsu High were not warriors or sorcerers. They were simply young souls resting between battles, gathered beneath a sky that asked for nothing more than stillness. A small fox darted across the path, its fur glimmering as it vanished between the trees. The world felt suspended, as if the night itself was holding its breath, waiting. The petals continued to fall, slower now, each one spinning lazily before it touched the ground. The courtyard glowed faintly pink, the firelight weaving with the moonlight to create a dreamlike shimmer. Yuji sighed contentedly. If every night was like this, I'd never complain again. Nobara smiled. You'd still complain about the cafeteria food. He chuckled. Fair point. Maki looked up from her work, sliding her blade back into its sheath. Don't jinx it. Peace doesn't last long around here. Megumi's gaze flickered toward the darkened trees beyond the courtyard. He didn't say anything, but for a moment his expression grew thoughtful, almost wary. Then he shook his head, brushing away the feeling. The fire popped, sending sparks upward like tiny stars. They didn't know what the night would bring, nor that a whisper would soon drift through the blossoms, soft as a sigh. For now, all they had was the warmth of the fire, the quiet company of friends, and the promise of a few hours of peace beneath the cherry trees. The fire burned low in the courtyard, its amber glow pulsing softly like a heartbeat. The night had deepened into a perfect stillness, the kind that wraps around the world like a warm blanket. The air was cool now, scented with drifting petals and damp earth. Yuji rested against the old cherry tree, half asleep, watching the faint trails of smoke rise into the sky. Nobara had leaned back beside him, eyes closed, her hand still holding a half-finished rice ball. Panda's quiet snores blended with the rhythmic crackle of the fire. Megumi sat a few feet away, his posture still alert, though his gaze was lost in the shimmer of moonlight over the courtyard stones. The faintest breeze brushed through the trees, carrying with it the soft flutter of falling blossoms. It was peaceful, almost too peaceful. Somewhere in the distance an owl hooted once, and then the world went silent again. Megumi's brow furrowed slightly. He couldn't place why, but something about the quiet had changed. It wasn't heavier, just different, like a still lake where the ripples had suddenly stopped. He turned his head slightly. The others hadn't noticed. Yuji's breathing was slow, steady. Nobara's hair moved gently with the wind. The petals continued to fall. Only now, when they landed, they didn't seem to stir again. They stayed where they fell, unmoving. Megumi rose slowly to his feet, his shadow stretching long across the courtyard. "Do you feel that?" he asked softly. Yuji blinked awake. "Feel what?" "The air," Megumi said. It shifted. Nobara yawned, rubbing her eyes. "You're being dramatic." "It's just the wind changing." Megumi didn't respond right away. He looked toward the tree line, where Gojo and Nanami had disappeared to gather firewood. The forest beyond was dark, still. The path glowed faintly with moonlight, but the end of it seemed swallowed by shadows. He took a slow breath. "No, it's not the wind." Yuji stood, brushing petals off his jacket. "You think it's a curse?" "Maybe." Megumi's voice was low, calm, measured, but weak. "I can barely sense it." Nobara stretched, standing beside them now. "Well, weak or not, it's ruining the vibe. Let's deal with it before Panda thinks it's snack time again." They shared a small smile, the kind that eased the tension just enough to keep them steady. Together, they walked toward the edge of the courtyard. The cherry trees arched above them, their branches crossing like woven fingers. Petals brushed against their shoulders and hair, soft as falling snow. The path beyond was quiet, too quiet. The night held its breath as they stepped onto the worn stone walkway that led into the small grove behind the school. The sound of the fire faded behind them, replaced by the soft crunch of their footsteps and the whisper of leaves overhead. A thin mist had begun to form near the ground, curling around their ankles. It glowed faintly in the moonlight, not bright, but enough to make the world shimmer at the edges. Yuji stopped, frowning. "Hey, look at this." He crouched and touched one of the stones lining the path. A faint black mark ran across it. Not paint, not dirt. It pulsed softly, like a heartbeat under the surface. "Residual energy," Megumi murmured. "But old. Really old." Nobara knelt beside him, tracing the mark with the tip of her finger. "Old or not, it feels cold. Like it's waiting." They looked at one another in silence. The mist thickened slightly, and somewhere among the trees, something made a faint rustling sound. A shadow flickered across the path. Quick, soundless. Then another, between the trunks. Yuji's instincts sharpened. "There," he whispered. But when they turned toward the sound, nothing was there. Only the petals falling through moonlight. They moved deeper into the grove. The trees here were older, their trunks gnarled, bark dark and cracked. The ground was soft, blanketed with petals that didn't stir even when the wind passed through. Then from above came a sound like the sigh of a flute. Long trembling, almost human. Yuji turned slowly. "Tell me you heard that." Nobara nodded, her hand already hovering near the handle of her hammer. "Yeah, and I don't like it." "It's coming from there," Megumi said quietly, pointing toward the heart of the grove. The three of them moved together. Careful, steady, their breathing synchronized with the rhythm of their footsteps. As they reached the center clearing, they saw it. An old stone lantern, half covered in moss, standing alone beneath a cherry tree that no longer bloomed. No petals, no leaves, just twisted branches reaching toward the sky like skeletal fingers. And at the base of the lantern, a cluster of faintly glowing symbols etched into the ground. They pulsed with a light so soft it could almost be mistaken for moonlight, if not for the way it flickered in rhythm with that same distant sound. A whisper rose through the air. Not a voice exactly, more like the memory of one. Words too faint to understand. Nobara stepped forward. "I don't sense malice, just sorrow." Megumi nodded. "It might be a remnant. Something bound here long ago." Yuji crouched beside the lantern, squinting at the marks. "What do we do?" "We purify it," Megumi said. "Gently. No need for force. It's peaceful." Nobara nodded and took a slow breath. She drew a small talisman from her pouch, pressing it to the side of the lantern. The paper fluttered softly, glowing faintly as it touched the stone. The symbols brightened for a moment, then dimmed. The air trembled, not violently, but as if exhaling. And then from the branches above, petals began to fall again. At first, slowly, then more. The dead tree bloomed. Soft pink blossoms unfolded in the moonlight, glowing faintly as they opened one by one. The mist began to lift, curling upward and dissolving into the night. Yuji exhaled in awe. Whoa! The ghostly sound faded, replaced by the rustle of wind and the soft hum of the earth. For a few seconds they stood in silence, watching as the tree came alive again. Then a quiet voice, faint, barely audible, brushed past them as if carried by the breeze. "Thank you." And just like that, the mark on the stone vanished. Nobara lowered her hand. "That's it." Megumi nodded slowly. "That's it. A simple haunting. Maybe a memory of someone who used to be here." Yuji smiled softly. "Then it's good we came." The three of them turned back towards the courtyard. The mist had fully cleared now, revealing the moon shining clear and bright. By the time they stepped out of the grove, the others had returned. Gojo stood at the edge of the courtyard, a bundle of firewood in one arm, his expression calm but knowing. "You three took your time," he said lightly. "Everything all right?" Yuji grinned. "Just a small curse. We handled it." Gojo nodded. "Good. Thought I sensed something faint earlier. It's quiet now." Nanami stacked the wood neatly beside the pit. "Then it seems our timing was perfect." The fire flared up again as Gojo tossed a log into it, sending sparks into the air. The glow illuminated the students' faces, calm, serene, touched by the moonlight and the faint scent of cherry blossoms drifting once more through the courtyard. Megumi sat down, his gaze softening as he looked toward the grove. The tree they had purified stood in the distance, newly alive, its petals glowing faintly in the night. Yuji leaned back against the old cherry tree again. "Guess the blossoms wanted to test us." Nobara smirked. "Then we passed." Gojo chuckled quietly. "That's my team." The group settled once more into the warmth of the fire. The night's tension faded, replaced by deeper stillness, not empty, but full of peace. The blossoms drifted again on the wind, their soft pink hue glowing under the moon. The courtyard breathed quietly. The world returned to calm. And above it all, the cherry blossoms kept falling, slow, endless, and gentle. The fire crackled softly in the center of the courtyard, sending lazy trails of smoke spiraling toward the stars. The moon hung high above, silver and serene, brushing the treetops in light. The newly bloomed cherry tree at the edge of the grove shimmered faintly in the distance, its petals glowing like tiny lanterns in the dark. Yuji sat close to the fire, holding his hands toward its warmth. The light danced across his face, softening his usual energy into something quieter. "You ever think," he began, voice almost a whisper, "that even curses have memories?" Megumi looked up. "Memories?" "Yeah." Yuji watched a spark drift upward and fade. "Like that one we just purified. It didn't feel angry. More like it was lonely." Nobara sat cross-legged across from him, chin resting on her palm. "Lonely, huh? That's kind of sad when you put it that way." "Everything leaves traces," Megumi said quietly. "Even people. Especially people." Nanami, sitting a little apart from them, looked into the fire with thoughtful eyes. Residual energy can linger long after a life is gone. Sometimes it's hate, sometimes regret, but sometimes, he paused, adjusting his glasses. Sometimes it's love, or longing. Gojo stretched out on the wooden steps nearby, one arm behind his head. "And sometimes it's just a tree that missed blooming," he said lazily, though his tone carried a gentle warmth. "But maybe that's the same thing in the end." Silence followed, not empty, but full of quiet understanding. The kind that doesn't need to be explained. A breeze passed through the courtyard, stirring the petals. A few drifted into the fire, glowing for a heartbeat before turning to ash. Yuji smiled faintly. When I first came here, I thought exercising curses was all about fighting. But this... He looked toward the glowing tree. This felt different, like helping someone find rest. Nobara nodded. Maybe that's what being a sorcerer really means. Not just fighting monsters, but mending the pieces they leave behind. Gojo tilted his head, smiling under his blindfold. You're starting to sound like real Jujutsu sorcerers now. Megumi gave a quiet chuckle. You sound surprised. Oh, not at all, Gojo said lightly. Just proud. The words hung in the air, warm as the fire. Panda rolled onto his side with a soft grunt. If every mission ended like this, I'd actually start enjoying work. That's because this one didn't involve running, Nobara teased. Or explosions, Megumi added. Yuji grinned. Or Sukuna. Panda raised a paw. Exactly. I call that a perfect night. They all laughed quietly, the sound mingling with the crackle of the fire and the soft rustle of blossoms. Nanami rose after a moment, smoothing his coat. You should all get some rest. It's late. Nobara stretched her arms above her head. I'm not arguing with that. Yuji leaned back against the tree, eyelids heavy. Think Gojo-sensei will let us skip morning drills? Gojo's grin was audible in his voice. Not a chance. Megumi sighed. Didn't think so. The laughter came again. Small, tired, but genuine. The kind that stays with you long after the sound fades. Above them, the cherry blossoms swayed gently in the night breeze, falling in slow, steady spirals. The petals caught the moonlight as they drifted past the fire, glowing like stars brought down to earth. For a long time, no one spoke. The world had grown hushed again, but not in fear, in peace. Megumi closed his eyes briefly, letting the sound of the wind fill the silence. He thought of the spirit that had whispered its thanks. A presence gone now, but not forgotten. Perhaps that was the real duty of a sorcerer, to protect life and honor what lingers after it fades. The flames flickered lower. Yuji's breathing slowed. Nobara's head tilted slightly as she began to drift into sleep. Gojo stood, glancing toward the grove one last time. The once dead tree shimmered faintly under the moonlight, its branches heavy with soft pink blooms. He smiled. Beautiful, isn't it? Nanami followed his gaze. It is. And rare. Maybe, Gojo murmured. That's why peace always feels like a miracle. He turned toward the sleeping students and lowered his voice. Let's keep it that way, at least for tonight. The fire burned down to glowing embers. The petals continued to fall, slow and endless, covering the courtyard in a blanket of silver and pink. Jujutsu High slept beneath the blossoms. And for the first time in a long while, the night was utterly, perfectly still. The first light of dawn came softly, brushing the world in pale silver and rose. Mist gathered low over the courtyard, drifting in thin ribbons across the stones. The fire had burned down to faint embers, still warm beneath a thin layer of ash. The students slept where they had settled, Yuji leaning against the tree, Nobara curled in her blanket beside him, Panda snoring quietly near the edge of the courtyard. Megumi sat upright, half awake, his arms folded loosely, gaze resting on the horizon. The sky above was painted with a faint watercolor glow, the kind that blurs softly between night and morning. The cherry trees stirred, shedding their final blossoms into the wind. From the path beyond the courtyard, Gojo returned with a steaming cup of coffee balanced in one hand and his blindfold draped loosely around his neck. His hair was a little disheveled from sleep, though his smile carried its usual ease. Nanami was already there, standing at the edge of the courtyard, hands in his coat pockets, watching the sun rise. The light caught the lenses of his glasses, turning them gold. Gojo stopped beside him, sipping his drink. "You've been up all night, haven't you?" Nanami gave a small hum of affirmation. "Old habits." "Thinking about last night?" Gojo asked. "Something like that." Nanami's voice was quiet, thoughtful. "That tree, it wasn't just a random curse." Gojo smiled faintly. "You noticed it too." Nanami nodded. "Residual energy that old doesn't linger by accident. It was bound here intentionally." The breeze moved through the blossoms, scattering a few petals at their feet. Gojo's expression softened. "You're right. This whole grove used to be a memorial." Nanami turned to him. "A memorial?" Gojo nodded, his voice dropping lower, almost reverent. "When Jujutsu High was first built, this area was part of the original temple grounds. Before it became a school, monks practiced here. One of them, an apprentice, died protecting the village from a curse. The cherry tree was planted for him." Nanami's gaze followed the distant tree, the one that had bloomed again under the moonlight. "So the spirit we encountered was likely his." Gojo's tone was gentle. A memory of the apprentice, bound to his tree. It hadn't bloomed in decades. The curse that lingered probably fed on forgotten gratitude, not malice. Nanami looked thoughtful for a long moment. To fade like that. To be remembered only through a dying tree. Gojo exhaled softly, his smile bittersweet. "It's kind of poetic, isn't it? A curse born from longing, healed by kindness." For a moment, neither spoke. The morning light grew stronger, turning the mist into shimmering gold. The tree in the distance glowed with it, petals catching the light like small flames. Megumi stirred, stretching as he stood. "You two are up early." Gojo grinned. "We're old men, Megumi. We don't sleep." "Then maybe you should try it sometime," Megumi muttered, rubbing his eyes. Yuji yawned behind him, hair sticking up in every direction. "What did I miss?" "Just the sunrise," Gojo said lightly. "And Nanami, learning that trees have feelings." Yuji blinked, confused but smiling. "Huh. Sounds about right for this place." Nobara sat up, groaning softly. "Please tell me we're not training this early." "Not today," Nanami said, surprising her. "You've earned the morning." Gojo smirked. "Even I agree. Write that down, it's rare." The group gathered slowly near the fire pit. The smell of dew and earth filled the air, blending with the faint sweetness of petals still drifting down. Yuji looked toward the grove. "It's really beautiful now, isn't it?" Megumi nodded. "Peaceful." Panda scratched behind his ear, blinking at the sunlight. "So that spirit, it's gone for good." "Not gone," Gojo said softly. "Freed. It'll stay in the blossoms now, like a memory that's finally at rest." Nobara smiled faintly. Then maybe that's why the air feels lighter. Gojo raised his cup in a mock toast. To peace, then. However long it lasts. Nanami gave a quiet nod. To peace. The students echoed the words softly, the sound almost blending with the wind. As the sun rose higher, light spilled through the branches, scattering diamonds of brightness across the courtyard. The petals gleamed, drifting upward for a moment before falling again. Slow, serene, endless. It was a new day. The world felt clean, renewed, as if the night's sorrow had been washed away by light. Yuji smiled as he watched the tree sway gently in the breeze. If every mission ended with flowers blooming, I think I'd like this job a lot more. Megumi's lips curved into the faintest smile. Don't get used to it. Still, Yuji said, stretching. It's nice to think we made something grow. Gojo's tone softened. That's what good sorcerers do. The group stood together in the quiet glow of morning, each one watching the blossoms drift on the air. For now the world was calm. No curses, no danger, just the sound of petals falling and the soft, steady breath of peace. Until next time, good night.